What's good, YouTube? It's me, boy Squiddy back in their Yugioh. I woke up a little sick today, but I'm like, hey, the people must know about cards that they should pick up. And yeah, I want to make a video about cards that I think you guys should pick up based on what's going on in the OCG and the sets that we're getting. So starting off at the top, without further ado, let's dive in. Snake Eyes FLAMBERGE Dragon at the beginning, because apparently pure Snake Eyes is somehow a deck now in the OCG. Now, this deck is extremely powerful because it does take advantage of a lot of the new support that we're getting in Phantom Nightmare, which drops in February. I know that's a long time away, but hey, this is a downtime during the down season of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where we don't have any other major events going on. So now is actually, you know, a good time to take advantage of the holidays and, you know, pick up the cards that we need when the season starts picking up again after or rather Phantom Nightmare drops. I think it's Finey is what the code is. Anyways, we're getting Populous in the new set, and this enables a bunch of things in tandem with the Bonfire card that we're actually getting out of Maze of Memories, which is basically a Rhoda, a reinforcement of the army for any level 4 Pyro monster. And that in itself allows Populous to basically go off. For those of you guys that don't know what Snake Eyes Populous does, this card says if it's added to your hand except by drawing it, you can special summon her, and then you get to add a Snake Eyes Spiral Trap from your deck to your hand. So it's effectively a better copy of Dark Witch because you don't have to send anything. You also don't have to waste your normal summon at all because this just, when you add it off of Bonfire, you reveal it, special summon it, add a Snake Eyes Spiral Trap, and go to the races. And especially with Snake Eyes FLAMBERGE Dragon, you're actually able to set up about 3 to 4 bodies onto the board using just a Bonfire, if I'm not mistaken, because they do take advantage of the other Snake Eye cards like the Snake Eye Oak, which allows you to special summon back a level 1 fire monster that's banished or in your graveyard, as well as Snake Eye Ash, which is basically a Stratos for a level 1 fire monster. So these cards are all very, very highly effective, and Populous was basically the bread and the butter that tied everything together as a glue, and now Snake Eyes FLAMBERGE Dragon is finally playable alongside some of the other Snake Eyes stuff. So guys, this only comes in Secret Rare as well as Quarter Century Rare, and that's at about 40 bucks. I think the Secret Rare is only about $8 or $9. So for me, you know, I think this deck will actually be playable in the TCG. Whether it's good or not, time will tell. But if it's playable in the OCG, that means people will hype it up in the TCG. So I do see this card actually going up. And if you guys do want to take advantage of how cheap the cards are right now, you should definitely pick them up, especially if you want to play the deck. We're getting a lot of new support in Phantom Nightmare, and yeah, some of the older cards as well. You know, there are a bunch of other stuff like Divine Temple of the Snake Eye, which I believe is like $1 right now. It's an ultra rare, but that's something else you could look at because the OCG recipes do actually play 1 or 2 copies of this. Next, let's talk about a hand trap that I was talking about in the last video, but MEISTER. Well, why is this card good? It happens that we're getting a lot of Fire King monsters, and you know, Fire King monsters are very, very susceptible to MEISTER because they all activate in the graveyard. They all have trigger effects that activate when they are actually destroyed. And one of the new cards, Fire King High Avatar Kirin, actually allows you to special summon back a Fire King monster from your graveyard when he's destroyed from his deck directly. And there are cards that allow you to now destroy cards directly from your deck, which is absolutely nuts. There's a new Sacred Fire King Garunix as well that can actually come back from the graveyard over and over. So Fire Kings can actually get choke pointed hard by one MEISTER, not to mention that it actually does affect the Unchained stuff as well, right? This is just other copies of Ash, because when they do set something like an Abominable Chamber and then use the effect of Shavara rather to try and trigger it, then you can chain the effect of MEISTER and it serves like a pseudo Ash Blossom in that case. And then there are just so many ways that you can actually abuse MEISTER, I think, right now, that it's just such a nice card to have. Like, it still kind of works against certain combo decks, you know, that do have cards activated in the graveyard. So I think it's just a no-brainer to pick this up while it's cheap. Whenever this card is playable, it usually goes up in price. We do have a Secret Rare printing as well as a Quarter Century Rare printing, so just pick your poison, you know, depending on your budget. Next, let's talk about the Labyrinth cards. ARIAS, the Labyrinth Butler. This card is quite cheap right now. I think it's about $12 to $15 for Secret Rare, and it was just printed in Egg. Well, this card is actually very, very powerful in Labyrinth, and the OCG recipes do run between 1 to 3 copies of this depending on how you tailor your build. But effectively, this card allows you to set a trap card from your hand directly and then use the trap card during your opponent's turn. So it's effectively a hand trap, literally, if you open this with any other trap to set a normal trap. And now, why is Labyrinth getting hype? Well, they're actually getting 2 very powerful trap cards in the upcoming sets. Number 1 is actually called Rumpo Teufel, I believe is the way to pronounce it. This is a German word. Shout out to the person that commented last time on this video on how to pronounce this. But effectively, when this card is discarded to the graveyard, you can actually banish it and declare a monster name, and then neither player can activate the card effects of that monster for the rest of the turn. So how it works is you would obviously just ditch it off of any of the Labyrinth's furniture cards, and then you get a free, basically a negation of a monster effect, preventing them from activating the effect. The other card that we're actually getting is called Transaction Rollback, and this card is also a card that activates in the graveyard by banishing itself, then targeting a normal trap card in the graveyard. This card's effect becomes that card's effect in the graveyard, which is nuts. So now you have free cards to discard off of the Labyrinth's furniture cards. It's no longer a -1, and on top of all of that, you're able to abuse your powerful trap cards like Big Welcome Labyrinth more than once per turn, because again, activating Big Welcome Labyrinth is once per turn, but using the effect of the other trap to copy it, Transaction Rollback, is actually not a restriction. So you can just copy the effect and use the double bounce on that turn. It doesn't matter. You know, if you use the effect of Big Welcome, you can still bounce. So this is a very, very powerful card that I think is definitely a 3 copies of. And, you know, people are going to think like, hey, you know, maybe Labyrinth cards are actually a good thing to pick up because the deck will be tier 1 probably, or tier 2. It's already kind of playable, guys. You can't deny it. And I think it's just going to get a power boost. So I do see ARIAS being one of the cards that are prominent for buyout because it's not actually been reprinted for a while. Next, let's talk about some other stuff for Phantom Nightmare. Number 1 is Nadir Servant, especially in the quarter century rare. This is about $15. We are actually getting a bunch of ritual support for the existing Skull Guardian archetype. Yep, the old guy from TP2 way back in the day. Now we are getting a retrain of Skull Guardian in the Silent Forcer archetype, and this is a very, very powerful archetype that actually makes usage of a lot of stuff in their extra deck. And when you do play Nadir Servant, you're easily able to send something like Herald of the Arc Light, or better yet, an Entis if you want to disrupt your opponent, as well as be able to add a copy of Maximus, who you can then leverage to send more copies of Heralds and just search your deck for infinite ritual cards. So Nadir Servant, I think, is actually a very, very powerful spell card in that deck, especially because you're not actually special summoning any monsters from the extra deck for the most part. You're just relying on the new Skull Guardian, who is actually an Omni Negate. He allows you to negate the activation of an effect and destroy the card as well, assuming that you do control Novox, the Silent Forcer Disciple, who is the new Novox that off one card you can set up the Skull Guardian with Novox back on the table, as well as cards in your hand. So it's a very, very powerful control deck along the lines of Drytron, and people are actually very hyping it up in the OCG. It's done very well. It's topped a lot of tournaments. Next is another card that you should consider just for this sole deck's existence, and that's Pre-Preparation of Rites. Well, why? Because Pre-Preparation of Rites actually now allows you to add a copy of the new ritual spell card, which is called Silent Forcing Prayer, that mentions actually 3 cards: Ceravis, Saphira, and the Skull Guardian. So you can actually add any of these cards that you desire directly from your deck alongside the new ritual spell card. So this is just a very, very powerful thing that I think, you know, it's no brainer to play 3 copies of this one. It's an instant +1, and this card at QCR is like $10 right now. It's so cheap. You guys have to understand that this is one of the staples for the ritual decks. No matter what ritual deck in the future, it will always be pre-prep as a staple. This is an insane starter, an insane mid-game card, and an insane recovery card, right? Altogether, this card does so much for you. So I definitely think that this is the type of card that we want to pick up before it goes up. And then another ritual card is actually Odd Eyes Pendulumgraph Dragon. This card comes in 2 copies, either secret rare or ultra rare. Now, the secret rare specifically is only $1, and that's like the bling bling version of this card. Why this card? Well, this card is actually playable in the Silent Forcer deck because this is actually a dragon ritual spell card, and the new Silent Forcer card ritual actually says that you can special summon a light dragon monster, or a light ritual monster for that matter. So being able to summon out the Odd Eyes is very, very free in this deck. And the fact that this card is a dragon means that it can be added off of the Skull Guardian, who only adds a copy of a warrior or a dragon ritual monster. So it allows you to use that to leverage and add him directly to your deck and then ritual summon him. And again, this card does have a very powerful effect on the field where you can negate the spell card effect. Once per turn, when your opponent activates a spell card or effect, quick effect, you can place this card in Pendulum Zone. And if you do negate that effect, and then if you place this ritual summon card in the Pendulum Zone, you can actually summon out an Odd Eyes monster from your deck, which is very, very nice. And the best target for this, from what I've seen in the OCG, is actually Odd Eyes Wing Dragon, who's actually a 3k beater. Unfortunately, it's not a quick effect, but it says you can target one effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects into the end of the turn. That's a ignition effect, which is still decently good, right? It's not like horrible. You can still leverage this, you know, negate a spell effect, get a 3k beater, and then if it survives on your turn, actually use the effect. But other than that, you get a free body as well. That's a level 8. So there are a lot of applications for this card in the Silent Forcer deck. So I think you guys should pick up the secret rare copies while it's cheap. You know, people will start buying this stuff out as soon as somebody starts hyping it. And then the last card that I think you guys should pick up is actually PITTKNIGHT early, especially the super rare copy, because this is really, really cheap, or the ultra rare rather, because that actually was printed in that one holo form. And this card is actually playable in the Fire King deck. There's actually a 1-card combo using Bonfire and Populace to actually go off into the entire Fire King combo, and it's really, really nuts. You're able to set up High King Avatar Kirin back in your hand, as well as Guru Nix in your hand, in your graveyard rather, with a lot of cards in your hand, and then PITTKNIGHT early actually comes back over and over to negate card effects. So this being a fire monster is very, very important, as well as the fact that you can actually link up Promethean Princess directly into it should you be locked and be in a very fragile state, right? Because Promethean Princess actually does lock you into fire monsters. So fire link monsters will be a premium going forward in the next format. So I think this card at the holo printing that it only has one of will definitely potentially go up to $4 or $5, right? So this is another card that I think you guys should pick up. So that's about all I had for this video. If you guys have any cards you think we should definitely have for the upcoming format as well, let us know in the comments below. Other than that, subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.